Hello, welcome to the 12th episode of Rachel Pilcher's Writing Workshops Sunday Facebook Live event. I am Rachel Pilcher, and tonight's topic is going to be what's the deal with writer's block. Sorry to start a little bit late. I was having some directional issues. I've changed some ways that I'm doing my recording, so I'm hoping that with the changes that I'm doing, I'm running it off of my data plan on my phone instead of off the Wi-Fi, that will help with some of the image issues and maybe some of the cutouts that we've been having with Wi-Fi. For some reason on Sunday nights, my Wi-Fi decides it just really doesn't want to work for us today. So hopefully we're not going to have a problem with that. So getting on to the topic, what's the deal with writer's block? So writer's block is, basic definition for those of you who may not know. It's basically when you are unable to write for whatever the reason. Excuse me. And there are varying ideas. There are some writers that are fairly sure writer's block does not exist because they have always been able to figure their way around their blocks that they were having. And then there are others that writer's block is just very crippling to their ability to actually get anything done. I would have to say that, I do suffer from writer's block on occasion, and, most of mine is due to, stress of the day-to-day work. It's working a job, coming home, taking care of a home, and sometimes whenever I do have the opportunity to sit down and actually get to my writing, there's nothing there. And as a writer, I'm sure all of you know that is absolutely terrifying when you get to that point and there is nothing there and you're just staring at the blank page and you don't quite know what to do about that. So I'm hoping that just by giving you some ideas that I use whenever I'm facing writer's block, got that cough back again. But just sharing some of the ideas that I use whenever I am dealing with writer's block to really get things done that they might help you if you are suffering from writer's block. So the first thing I always have to remind myself of this is that when I have writer's block, I need to just try to write. It sounds absolutely difficult to do whenever you're having an issue with writing, but you have to remember that whatever it is you're writing, nobody is going to be reading at the very beginning. So you can put down what you need to put. If you're rambling, you can ramble. Rambling is okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing that whenever I'm talking to y'all. But when you're rambling, eventually you might be able to work yourself out of a ramble, or you'd have something that's within that piece of writing that will allow you to be able to put it into a bigger piece of work so that you can get something out of that. You really just have to apply your butt to the seat and get the work done. You don't need to worry about making it perfect. I know one of the biggest issues that many writers have is with perfectionism and trying to make sure that every single sentence is absolutely perfect, every word is absolutely perfect, and you know what? It's great to do that. The problem comes if you're doing it at the very beginning of the writing process. You're creating a perfect draft is not on the first draft. The perfect draft is going to be the third or fourth draft, maybe the second draft. I do have some tea. I'm going to drink some tea. But it's not in that very first draft. So the key thing that you need to do is not edit while you're writing. So if you do that, you'll never finish. If you keep going back and changing 3 or 4 words in a sentence or deciding if there's a comma here or a comma there, then you're never going to get to the end. So just write it as it's coming to you. Try not to go back and look at it until you're done, or until you get to a point where it's like, okay, I finished. You're working on a novel. I finished chapter 1. I might spend a day going back and working on that, and then go on to the next chapter. If you're writing a short story, write the whole story, then go back and start tweaking it, start editing it, get it to where it needs to be. If you're writing poetry, write the same thing. It's the exact same thing for everything. Whatever it is you're writing, don't edit while you're doing it. Go back and edit it later. Now, there is a school of thought on the just getting it done, that there's this one writer who, he works a full-time job, and he's able to write a first draft of a novel in 4 weeks. I don't know exactly how he does it. His wife must do everything around the house, and he just basically gets to lock himself away for 5 or 6 hours a night and write. But one of the things that he does do is he will put specific details. If he doesn't really have those details, he'll put those in brackets. So what that means, brackets are the little things that you have on your keyboard, shaped just like that. And the brackets, he'll put in a quick description of what he wants to have happen in that section of the story. So it could be that, he's having a dinner party in the story, and he has some dialogue, and he knows what he wants to happen in there. Well, in the brackets, he might put describe dinner party, and then move on to the next part. Describe what they're eating, move on to the next part. And in doing that, he might start with a first draft that has maybe 35,000 words in it. And then he can go back, and in the second draft, he can start filling in the information that's in those brackets. So the important part of that is basically just getting the story down. Getting it from beginning to the end, and being able to get all of the information that you need to have in that story written down. So, by your second draft, you can very easily add up to, 50 or 60,000 words just by adding the description. If you are doing a car chase and you want to talk about the different types of cars, if you don't know the specific details about this particular model year Corvette that you're putting in this street race scene, you don't have to put that down. You can put it later. Put it in the bracket, say, describe the Corvette. So just not focusing completely on all of the details, but getting the specifics that you need to tell the story and to move the story along is a great way to to help with that type of a block. Because I know with myself, and I try to do this, I will I'll sit down and I'll write something, and it's okay. But I get stuck on a sentence, or I'll get stuck on a description, and I found with the last story that I wrote, I was able to just write it all the way through, get it all down, and then go back through and add the details later, and it made it so much easier to not be stuck on it. I even, you don't have to go back through that day. You can sleep on it a day. You can sleep on it a week. You can go back, in a month or two, and then go back and read it and see if it can have the information that you need it to have in there later. That way you're not focusing on how crazy it is for you right then. So the next thing I do is that if I'm getting stuck in a story, I will, if I haven't already done it, because I'm not really a huge pantser, is that I will go and outline. So I think I've talked about it before. There's a difference between, there's the saying of a plotter and a pantser. So a plotter plans ahead of time what's going to happen in the story, and they will go through that. And usually what plotters do is they do an outline. Pantsers, they just sit down and write and let it happen. Now, I do that too. I do that a lot on short stories, but I have an end in mind. That is something that you really do have to do if you are a pantser. You have to know where you're going. And there are some writers that just I don't know, I just sat down, started writing it, and it just came out. That works for some people, but for most people, they do have to outline. So, you really have to make sure that whenever you're outlining that you don't overwhelm yourself. It could just be, one idea. 2, idea, 3, idea. And those ideas can end up being the chapters. It doesn't have to be a full thing. I've actually started outlining a novel, and I'll just write a couple of sentence synopsis of what I want to happen in each chapter. That's an outline, and that will get you to where you need to be whenever you sit down and write it. So by doing that, whenever you do get to the point where you're writing your story, you can go and look at your outline and say, okay, I'm stuck. Where am I going with this? And you can see if the ideas that you've had in place do fit into what you're trying to write. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is time. I know time is probably the biggest obstacle that I personally face. I have a lot going on in my personal life. I have a lot going on in my business, and I have a lot going on as a librarian. And even more so lately, there's been a lot added on to my job description. So I have been coming home completely worn out every day, and I don't particularly want to sit down and start writing when I've spent all day looking at a computer working on student laptops or something like that. So it has put a little crimp in my plans for getting some work done. But you have to look at what time you do have. You should have some downtime. Number one, absolutely, you must have downtime. It's never good to work all day, then come home and just really start working on something else, because eventually it may not happen now, it may not happen in 3 weeks, it may not happen in 3 years, but eventually you are going to burn out. And that's with anything. That's with, building furniture whenever you get home. That's with anything that you're doing. So it's always good, though, to look at some of those things that you're doing in your downtime and see if you could fit in just a tiny bit of writing during that time. So if you come home and the first thing you do is pull out your iPad and you start looking at social media and you do that for 2 or 3 hours, that is definitely a time issue. So if you do that, that's going to add to your overwhelmingness of not being able to get things done. So just pull out, when you pull out your iPad, just open up a notes document, or I have Microsoft Word on my iPad, so you can pull out Microsoft Word and just start writing something. Anything that comes to mind. Even if it's, my day was crap because of this. And it sounds more like a journal than it does, and we'll talk about that later. But just using some of that time that you do have, that you can fill, that you would normally be doing something that's kind of mindless, and it may be resting and it may not be resting, but getting your work done at that point. So if you have the personal downtime when you're watching TV shows, this is a really good TV show. I've actually given up watching a lot of TV. I do watch a lot of Netflix, which that is something that is a time waster for me. So I do have to work on that to make sure that I'm not spending a lot of my time watching Netflix and not doing my writing. But I also try to get some work done during my lunch break. I very much value my 45 minutes that I have for lunch, and I try to use it as wisely as possible, whether it's catching up on writing professional development stuff, so listening to podcasts about writing, or if it is working on a short story or doing some research on potential freelance writing. I do spend some of my lunchtime working on that kind of stuff besides eating. That does help me not feel so overwhelmed whenever I do get the chance to sit down and write, that I have to get everything done all in this one bit of time. And just anytime that you do have some downtime, whether maybe you have kids and you've taken them to soccer practice and you're waiting for their practice, or piano or whatever, and you have a little bit of time, sit in the car, sit on the bleachers, wherever you are, and jot some ideas down. You can even use your voice recording app on your phone. I think I've talked about that before. Use the voice recording app on your phone. If you don't really have time to write things down, you can always hit that button, start recording. I found out, interestingly, that my iPad actually has a voice to text on Microsoft Word. I could even just tell it to put the periods in and it'll do it. So if you have a long commute, you can tell your story while you're driving, and your iPad or the voice recording app that you have on your phone, you can tell your story and get that in there right then. So I know this is kind of leading into tips of how to get your writing done, but you know, a lot of that is, I think, with writer's block, it really is having a difficult time figuring out when it's going to happen, and then whenever you sit down to do it, when you finally have the time to do it, you don't know where to start. So if you could just get little snippets here, little snippets there put together, then when you do sit down and you do have time to put all of that together, you already have somewhere to start. So this is just one way of conquering writer's block. And I think that one of the best things that I do for myself, absolute best things I do for myself, and it's when, not even first thing in the morning, but anytime I feel like I need to do it, is that I journal out issues that I may be having. Because there are some times when I could be having creative blocks, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in my journal, but I will pull out my iPad and I'll just start talking about, typing down what are the blocks. I'm having this issue right now and this issue right now, and what can I do to make it better? And that really does help. I do think that journaling is one of the best free forms of therapy that you can have. So definitely use your journal wisely and have it work for you and help you work out your issue as to why you might be having a block. So the main thing that you need to do, though, is to not allow yourself to spend too much time staring at a blank page, or constantly going back and rewriting that paragraph that you've been working on. That's not going to actually advance your story. So I know this wasn't a whole lot of like, well, writer's block is a psychological thing and you have to deal with your psychology issue. I'm not a psychologist. I know that my reason for having writer's block when I do is going to be completely different than your reason for having writer's block, and completely different from the guy down the street who writes all the time and has no idea what you're talking about when it comes to writer's block. But it's trying to figure out what works for you to get out of that creative block is going to be the thing that you have to figure out. So those are just some things that I use, and I hope that maybe one of them, maybe all of them, can help you. So next time we meet is going to be episode 13, October the 7th, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, Sunday, October 7th. And I'm debating on topics, but I think what I'm going to do is discuss, because I've had a couple people ask me, what's the difference between traditional versus indie or self-publishing? So I'm going to try to get it down to 15 or 20 minute discussion. I've actually taught an entire course on the difference and what you have to do to prepare for it. So we'll see what I can do if I can get it down to 15 or 20 minutes. But I thank you very much for joining me tonight. And if you are watching this on the replay, feel free to ask any questions that you have on the replay. I will definitely chime in and answer your questions, because I do get alerts every time somebody makes a comment, or when somebody likes it. If you like the video, go ahead and like it. Feel free to share the videos, any of them that I have posted. We do have 12 as of today. Feel free to share. And I will be putting these on YouTube, so if you're watching this on YouTube, on the Rachel Pilcher Writing Workshops YouTube channel, feel free to make comments on the YouTube channel. I haven't noticed that I've had any comments, so but I will definitely be checking. So I want y'all to have a great night. If you're in Texas, stay dry. It's still kind of damp out there. I've noticed it was sprinkling a little earlier. So y'all have a great night. Thanks. Bye.